Hello and welcome. This is Founder Levern with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be checking out some more tools, and one of them that I tend to use occasionally is the Chat GPT. If you have a paid account, it's a little bit better. And also, if you are going to create a commercial product, you want to make sure that you check with the publisher or with the platform that you're working with, because there are different regulations and rules in regards to creating content with Chat GPT, especially images or using Midjourney, those sort of things. But in this case, we're going to just kind of talk about Chat GPT. Nothing's going to replace the human mind in regards to creativity or in regards to coming up with original content. However, ChatGPT does take away a lot of the writing and a lot of the things that I have to do as a GM to prepare for homebrew content and things like that. So what I'm going to do is actually use ChatGPT to create content in Fantasy Grounds. I already kind of have a session set up here, so I'm going to go ahead and log in here. Then I wanted to prepare a couple things, so I want to load up just a few things, such as I'm going to put in that I want a better font, so I want to make sure that I have a font here that's going to be more legible. And then the other thing I might load in is, see, I had a theme enabled, but I don't think I want to do that. It's kind of distracting. And then I'm going to have, I'm just using the standard screen, the reference screen, so we don't have that. I'm going to load the automatic actions for the automation and such. I have those modules loaded in Fantasy Grounds, so I wanted to have that in case I want to make a character really quick. And then the Core RPG Author extension, I might use that at the end, so I'll go ahead and load that up later. But for right now, I just have a new, kind of a fresh, clean slate, and I have some content. I have like the DnD5e rule set loaded, and also some of the content that's going to be contextually useful when it comes to creating content for a certain setting. So in this case, it's going to be the Forgotten Realms, but if you're working on any other rule set, you can use those depending on what kind of things you're making. So I'm going to make like a kind of like a one-shot or maybe a three-shot type adventure from scratch. So this, I don't have any other things to copy other than using existing wiki pages and using Chat GPT. And of course, I'll use things like the Sword Coast Adventures Guide to kind of help with supplement the build. So this is just a clean slate here that I have for creating content. This is going to be my work folder. This is where I'm going to do all the work. I'm not going to run any campaigns in here. And what the first thing I want to do probably is to create a story entry or some sort of starting point where I'm going to actually be copying and pasting content. So I'm going to open up the campaign folder and navigate to the story entry. And here, these has different things loaded for different content that I have open in the library. So if I go to modules, see, I have a bunch of Rob 2E's coding effects, and then I have some setting specific stuff like the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. And then, of course, I have some third-party things that are useful from the DM's Guild that might be helpful. But I probably don't even need most of this stuff. Usually, I just work with the SRD. But in this case, I'm not trying to sell the content. I'm not trying to put it up on the forge or on the anywhere else. So this is for personal use. So I don't have a problem using things like AI to create my own content for my own personal use. However, some people are kind of pissed off and upset about the validity and the legality of using AI. I think it's perfectly fine to use it for your own personal use. As far as commercially or trying to sell it, that's a whole nother conversation. But nonetheless, I'm going to get started. So first things first is the prompt or the actual information that I gave ChatGPT to begin with, which is an important thing because a lot of times you need a starting point when you're going to start a conversation with ChatGPT. So you just want to maybe mention that you're going to be creating content for the DnD5e rule set. It'll understand that to a point. Also, you can mention that you're going to want to stick to mostly SRD stuff, so it does know about the SRD from its training. And then what I've fed it here is this big template here that I created in a separate document that I have stored. So this is something that I'm going to use over and over. And I advise that if you're going to use a program like Chat GPT, that you kind of do the same thing. So what this says is create a professional adventure design template for the DnD5e rule set. Use as a guide to create an adventure with detail and substance. So this is kind of my opening here for a prompt that I might use in any given situation. So for the first part is the adventure background. I want it to briefly describe the setting and that sort of thing, and the plot or the theme of the adventure. I wanted to give at least 3 or more plot hooks to engage the players and motivate their participation in the adventure. And then these can take the form of a direct summons, a desperate plea for help, or even starting from a local rumor in a public establishment like a tavern, an inn, or a marketplace. And then for the third one, I asked for an adventure synopsis to summarize the adventure's main events and locations, giving the GM an overview of the adventure structure and direction. And then finally, I had to suggest character levels, party size, and or suggest D&D game content or supplements. So if there's anything that it can come up with that may be something you want to use while you're creating content or while you're running the adventure, it's going to list it there. So the actual adventure structure is going to be locations, areas, room descriptions, generally 3 to 9 rooms or areas, depending on the complexity and the length of the story and adventure. I also noted, do not skimp out on dialogue, names, places, things, or descriptions. Be consistent, professional, grammatically correct, and adventure writing. So I want it to actually create content. I don't want it to tell me what to do because that's already kind of implied. I want information, details. I want stuff that's going to be a good foundation to work from. I don't want to have to do everything. That's the whole idea of having AI program, is kind of help you fill in those gaps. I don't want it to do everything, but it's certainly at least half of it. So important, always add NPC dialogue to help add immersion when possible. Generate official D&D NPC stat blocks, item description stat blocks, and rollable lists of choice are great. So I specifically said lists because if you don't, it's going to essentially create a table within this app, and I don't want a table. I just want a list so that I can make my own tables in Fantasy Grounds, and I actually gave it a format so it will know how to generate NPC stat blocks and lists, and I'll show you that later. So please create and suggest challenge ratings on the adventure and difficulty and such with the proper D&D rule set format when using skill checks. Also provide at least one alternate skill option that provides another method or ways, it says ways to avoid or solve a skill challenge. So, sometimes you'll see in books where they'll have, you have to roll this to find out this, but you can also roll this to find out this other thing. So it can be helpful to have a different perspective on finding information, but arriving at a different conclusion based on what skills and what proficiencies your players have. So that may have a higher chance of engagement with your party. So you suggest for instance, you can suggest the challenge ratings and difficulty and such. You want it to use the correct skill check format. You want it to set a different set of results or higher than required rolls. It might open up better outcomes. So such as rolling a natural 20, even though that's not a thing, you can incorporate that so that their narration or the information they get is a little better than what they would get with a standard, pass or fail. For each room or area, include the following information. Not every area has to include all of these, but when it's provided and applicable or necessary, please use the following format below. The numbers herein are for organizational structure, not necessarily reflective of the adventure chapters. So I had to put that in there because it was only creating just the bare minimum. So I wanted it to kind of expand on that. And then I said each area should be structured and similar for this area of 2.1. So this is the format for each area that I want this Chat GPT to generate. So I want a read aloud section if it's applicable. So I want some narration in here. So I want it to describe the area's appearance, sounds, smells, and other sensory details, as well as any immediately noticeable features or NPCs. Consider less common senses instead of always sight and sound, such as emotions, magical auras where appropriate. Please write in story format. So I'm tasking it to write it like a story and not just tell me what the information is. That's narration. I want to actually see and hear about it. I don't want to be told about it. And the other thing is the GM section. Provide additional background information, setup details, and any secrets or hidden features that may be revealed during the encounter. Also mention any other relevant information. So that's just for the GM part. For the encounter details, I want combat, traps, puzzles, riddles, setbacks, or role-playing challenges the players may face in this area, including relevant tactics, strategies, or hints to help guide the player. So that's one of the details that you'll get, or some of the details you get in the encounter section. The reward section will list potential rewards for completing the encounter, such as treasure, information, milestones, or progress toward the adventure's overall goal. So I always like to have some ideas for rewards, whether it be information or coins or whatever. And then the aftermath, if there is any, would describe any consequences or outcomes resulting from the player's actions in this area. As well as any connections or leads to the next area or room in the adventure. So provided that's a thing, I'm asking it to do that to help me put forward the information that may launch or lead us into the next area. So that's what the aftermath was for. And then after you're done with all your rooms and such, then I want it to write an adventure conclusion. So summarize the adventure's conclusion. You take into account the player's choices and the outcomes of their actions. Future plot hooks. So if you want to expand on it, you can offer suggestions for future adventures, plot hooks, or anything like that that build on the events from this particular session or adventure. And then the epilogue will provide and kind of like a long-term effect of the adventure on the game world or the players. And then I have a sidebar that we might put in there for content such as new mechanics, items, or important changes to the rules. So if you have any homebrew rules, I want it to create enough rooms to fill up at least 3 to 4 hours of exploration, role play, puzzles, traps, that sort of thing. And then kind of balance that out within the 3 to 4 hour time frame, so that the adventure isn't really a campaign. It's more of a 1, 2, 3 shot type thing. And then here's where it's actually breaking down and writing it. So what it decided to do was to create an adventure called Silver Echoes. It centers in the magical city of Silvery Moon, and there's been some strange occurrences that's been happening. The city's well-regarded magic academy, the Conclave of Silvery Moon, has been the target of numerous break-ins and thefts. Notable magic items have disappeared, and the suspects are elusive and unseen. So then it gives me 3 adventure hooks. So this is the stuff that it's generated, which is really nice. And being that I have given it some parameters, it makes it that much smoother, and you have a little bit more control over what's being outputted. Because if you just say, make me an adventure, it's really not going to necessarily give you a really structured format as to what you want. It's very important to create that initial dialogue and kind of be consistent with that, because if you stay within the parameters, the conversation doesn't trail off or become invalid after a while. Because if you keep talking to it or adding comments to it, and then you start straying off topic, it just becomes a big mess. And if you stay on target and you don't make the conversation 50,000 questions and answers back and forth, it'll help you. What I notice is when I started getting past a certain point, the limitations of the AI take over and you start losing context of what you're talking about. And it gets annoying if you need to refer back to something, it will forget that stuff. And you have to actually go back and copy and paste that information back in so it remembers. And at that point, you might as well just do it yourself. So I'm just giving you a tip or at least a guide that says, just be careful with how far and how long the conversation goes. If you need to have several separate conversations, which are separate sessions in the context. So over here are all the different conversations that I've had with this. Some of these are related, some are not, but it really depends on what your needs are and what you're trying to do. What I really think is ideal is you get kind of like a structure, and then for each chapter or each type of content you're working on, make that a separate, more focused conversation. Because what you're going to get is a hodgepodge of crap and BS as you go further away from the original question. And that's generally where this AI falls down on its face, is it doesn't have the capability of remembering or thinking beyond a certain point. There's actually a character limit on how much information you can put into it, and there's also a limit on how much it retains in memory. So if you go too far out from just the same conversation, you're going to lose focus and it's going to become kind of useless. Once in a while, it'll come up with something creative, even though you didn't want it. But if you really want to put this AI to work and actually help you, it's a little better to put in the time in each section and kind of make it more focused and try to stay on topic. So the topic on this thing is to actually create this adventure, and then anything related to it, I'll try to do that. But as I get further beyond the structure of the adventure, it gets less and less useful as far as generating content. It starts doing all kinds of weird stuff after a while. It'll take your last 10 conversations but forget the first 6, and it will really piss you off after a while. It won't be useful. So what I'm doing now is kind of going down the prompt that I put in here. I also it spit out some pretty cool information. So this set in Silvery Moon, which I'm already excited about because it's not exactly the Sword Coast. It is in that region, but it's not the same cities like Waterdeep and Luskin and all those. It's actually a city that's not covered very often, and that's Silvery Moon. It was covered in the novels and in some of the game content from fourth edition. Really not a whole lot going on in the 5th edition rule set in regards to Silvery Moon, unless you find some content on the DM's Guild, which I might look for later to see if anyone's put anything out that's more related to Silvery Moon and the Silver Marches. But I like the idea that it actually took this city and made that the starting point. When I asked it to create something, it actually did create what I wanted. I said I want it set in the, I just said use the template above, but set it in, in a place like Silvery Moon or whatever. And it did that. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then it also, it took all of that and made what I want and then some. So it's really cool. It actually did some creative things too, on top of just keeping structure. So the adventure hooks for this is that you basically got all these thefts going on in Silvery Moon, and they're being taken from the prestigious conclave of Silvery Moon, which is like a collective of magic users and stuff that are, kind of running the educational system. Silvery Moon is kind of like a college town, if you want to look at it that way. But anyways, there's been numerous break-ins, lots of thefts, notable magic items disappeared, that sort of thing. So it gives you 3 adventure hooks, which is something I had asked for. So the party receives a summon from the Lady Illustrial herself. Wow, that's like getting the president to contact you. They'll request your aid in investigating the strange occurrences in the academy. The second hook is a student of the academy asks for help, fearing that a professor might be involved with some kind of inside job for the thefts. And then the third option, which is less likely, is the party overhears a whispered conversation in a local tavern it speaks about an upcoming heist on the academy. So there's 3 different plot hooks there for the GM to work with to kind of give them a starting point. So you're either summoned, or there's a desperate plea for help, or there's some kind of esoteric, kind of weird, kind of criminal element going on, something that you hear on the streets essentially, or in a tavern in this case. And then that would be something that you can write into your own adventure. So you can pick any one of those 3. That's a good starting point, and it gives you just enough context. I kind of believe in the rule of 3. Like 3 or more is usually generally pretty good. You get beyond like 6 or 8 or whatever, it starts becoming too much. So 1.3, the adventure synopsis says the party will investigate the strange happenings at the academy, leading them to various locations within Silvery Moon, and ultimately unveiling a conspiracy that threatens the magical integrity of the city itself. So it's actually a pretty serious thing. Suggested character levels for this adventure are levels 5 through 7, which is perfect. Those are my best favorite levels anyways. Party size of levels are from 4 to 6. So if I had a adventuring group of just 4 people, I'd probably want most of those guys to be 6th or 7th level. But if I have 6 players, then I probably want most of them between 5th and 6th level. So it really depends on your consistency of your party. Or you can make pre-gens are all level 6, which is average. This adventure can be enhanced with the content from the Dungeon Master's Guide, notably magic items and artifacts, as well as potentially to supplement Volo's Guide to the North for additional Silvery Moon content. So this is not a traditional DnD5e book, but if you own this or earlier editions, that might be helpful to help you flesh out Silvery Moon. The adventure itself starts at the Conclave of Silvery Moon. The read aloud section is basically saying, entering the grandeur of the Conclave of Silvery Moon, a towery structure of ivory and moonstone that glimmers within the ethereal light. A sense of ancient magic and knowledge permeates the air, invigorating and enchanting. So in the GM section, it says, hidden within the academy are secret passages used by staff for quick access. These have been exploited by the thieves. So recently, the thieves have exploited those passageways. For the encounter, the players must pass a DC 15 investigation check, which is, pretty difficult, but not too bad, to find out about the break-ins. On a natural 20, they discover a hidden passage. So not only do they get the clues about the break-ins, but if they roll a 20, they might discover a hidden passage. So I kind of like having an additional result. So a D20 doesn't necessarily mean a critical success, but it could mean more information. So I don't know if that equates to a critical success or not, but I kind of like that when it's written into an adventure to give you more to go on and not just, okay, roll this number and they have to beat it. I kind of like the degree of success, degree of failure. So what I could say also is that if they roll like 5 or under, they might be let off track. Maybe the thieves have created some kind of false flag or some kind of footprints that lead into a dangerous trap or whatever. So that could also be kind of a cool thing that you could put in there. So it doesn't always have to be beneficial. The reward was that they will find a scroll of comprehend languages as part of the clues. And then the aftermath would be finding the hidden passage that will lead them to the next location, which is the Moon Bridge. So the Moon Bridge is a very powerful, magical, almost like an artifact or a landmark within Silvery Moon. It's very part of its culture, and it leads you to that area. So if you read aloud, it says over a bubbling creek, but I actually had it redo it as the River Ravin. The Ravin River runs through town. It's not a creek. So I had it change that. So this is the type of thing that you'll have to look for when you're using Chat GPT. It may not know exactly what you need in regards, because unless you give it a full description of the city and everything else, it's going to make mistakes, or it's going to put stuff in there that doesn't quite fit what you're looking for. So there's really not a creek here. This is actually a river. So I changed that in my next prompt. And then it says it's eerily silent, but the feeling of powerful enchantment can also be touched, or almost touched. So a magical trap set by the thieves in this area has been used to deter pursuers. Encounters have to make an Arcana check to notice the magic trap. Failure results in triggering an alarm spell that alerts the thieves. You'll be rewarded successfully by avoiding the alarm, and the party will find a discarded cloak of Elvenkind, a vital clue. And then the aftermath will be the party can trace the cloak's magic to a location in the city called the Shining Scroll. And what it does here now, this is where it gets lazy, or where it doesn't want to go any further. It says additional room and encounter descriptions go here. So I'm going to tell this thing, no, I want you to elaborate and make some more areas. So I'll ask the prompt again, but I'll tell it, hey, I'd like a few more areas detailed. Then it goes to the outro where it says, with the party's intervention, the break-ins stop. The Conclave restores its security, and Silvery Moon is safe once again. For future plot hooks, it says the thieves were part of a larger organization. Who is the mastermind behind it, and what is their goal? And then for the epilogue, it says the Conclave of Silvery Moon offers the party honorary titles and free access to their library for thanks. Their reputation in Silvery Moon significantly increases. So I really like that. It's not just treasure. It gives you some roleplay options there and some future, considerations. And then for a sidebar, we have to consider introducing a custom magic artifact tied to the history of Silvery Moon, which could be one of the objects that was stolen from the Academy. This can add depth to the plot and create opportunities for future adventures. So this is kind of an outline. And this is where I said, okay, change this creek thing to a flowing river. So it kind of repeated everything except for it changed this area here where it says, spanning the mighty River Raven, a bridge made entirely of moonlight shimmers in the dark. Despite the river's powerful current, the bridge is eerily silent, and the palpable aura of a magical enchantment hangs in the air. So this is kind of where I think I'm going to put it, where the thieves actually used a boat to get into the water and sail down to another part of the city so that it can remain undetected or make it harder for them to be discovered or followed. So this is, and there's also a magical trap here. So that could be a thing. And then the rest of the information is the same. So then it kind of repeats everything, which is kind of normal. And then I said my response to this was, this is a good outline above, but it lacks substance and the locations. There are no defined NPCs or lore. So I told it, hey, I'm not quite happy with everything that was provided. Let's do something more. So it says, okay, sorry about that. Let's add more depth. So it goes in and it changes some things. It adds in a little bit more detail. And then it actually changed the information here. And it asked, instead of a, so this Elminster Amar, the infamous sage, asked to the adventurers that the thefts could be destabilize the weave of the magic in the city. So Elminster himself is concerned, and he decides that he wants to pipe in. So this is an additional adventure hook that it provided when it rewrote. So it doesn't always recopy things verbatim. You have to tell it, like if you want to keep everything exactly the same when you have it reprompt, you have to tell it, hey, keep everything the same except for, and then you tell it the piece that you want it to change. I didn't mind the change because it gives me another adventure hook, so it's not going to bother me too much here. And then it just, then of course it keeps with the tavern overhearing the heist plans. So then it did go into the synopsis. It says the adventurers follow the players. The adventurer follows the players as they investigate the break-in at the Conclave, leading them through a web of intrigue that spans across Silvery Moon and reveals a conspiracy that threatens to disrupt the delicate balance of magic in the city. So we already knew that. And then it gives us that information. But what it did here is it details the Conclave. It details the Moon Bridge, changed a little bit of things here, but what it did is it added Valus and Liara, which are NPCs, and then it says that they can track the residual magic to the Shining Scroll, which is a magic shop owned by the lovable but eccentric gnome Naxine Drathkala. So there's another NPC. So it's going to add NPCs in and little details that I asked it to do so. Additional locations include now the Shining Scroll Magic Shop, the Everland Pass, and finally the Thieves' Hideout at the edge of the city. So it kind of added some things, and then it added the Headmaster, Mithramor Moonstar. He also suspects an inside job. It kind of added a little bit more detail, which is nice, because then now you got a better starting point, and you're not just giving, oh, you have this thing happening and it has an NPC. Instead, you're actually getting some names, places, that sort of thing. And then it goes back to the outro and then the sidebar, but now it actually talks about the Shining Scroll and the Everland Pass. So these are new locations. And then the Thieves' Hideout, and then your story outro. And then I said I wanted to add in a stopover between the city and Everland Pass. So in doing so, I found out that there's an inn on the way before you reach the pass, because the pass is kind of where the rogues hideout is. So this kind of gives us an idea, and I took this information from the wiki, and I actually edited this a little bit, and then I added it in, and I said, let's make a stopover, let's create this Moon Wyvern Inn. So I gave it the information from the wiki, and now it updated and created 2.4, which is another location. And it says that you can traverse to the pass. It says the warm glow of the Moon Wyvern Inn comes into view. It's charming haven, nestled against the river's tumult, offers respite for weary travelers. And it gets into the owner is kind of a shady person. You can use this encounter to kind of shake things up. The proprietress, Clarshi Taraf, a woman who knows more than she lets on, might possess information valuable to the party. So if you can persuade or intimidate her, she might share rumors that she's heard about the Veiled Alliance's activities. If the party chooses to stake out the inn instead, they can use a 15 perception or higher that allows them to spot a suspicious individual who turns out to be a Veiled Alliance contact. So this is another thing that kind of helps lead into the end of the adventure. So this gives you a chance to rest, to sell items and trade a little bit, and it gives you more information about where you're going potentially and the hazards involved with it. So I kind of liked it how this turned out. And then I said include a representative of the law and protection as an NPC, or even created as a potential player character. So you might actually have a player character in the wings in case you have a small group. You can have an NPC or some sort of player character to help round the party out. So this is a Spellguard female. She's really good looking, beautiful, talented, smart, and very loyal to Silvery Moon. She helps request or represent Silvery Moon's response to the recent events involving the theft. So this is something I added in, and it said sure. So it gave me Liara Shadowmantle. She's a high-ranking member of the Spellguard, the magical police force of Silvery Moon. And as a half-elf, she's inherited the grace of her elven mother and the determination of her human father. Intelligence, diligence, and stunningly beautiful. She has a sharp wit and a sharper blade, and her commitment to the city is unwavering. So I really like how it's given me this character now that's fully detailed. She could either be a guide to the party throughout the adventure or a player character option. In the latter case, she would have deep knowledge about Silvery Moon and its magical institutions, and her position in the Spellguard would provide interesting roleplay opportunities and plot hooks. I could not agree more. The introduction would be that she is a symbol of the order and magical law enforcement in Silvery Moon. Her background involves rigorous training in both martial and arcane arts, preparing her for the role of the Spellguard, and they have her set as an Eldritch Knight, which is pretty close in 5e terms. You could actually make your own subclass that's more similar to the Eldritch Knight, or you can just go with what they suggest, which is a lot easier. Her personality is stern yet fair, and she carries an aura of calm confidence. While she is fiercely loyal to Silvery Moon, She also has a compassionate heart and often lends an ear to those in need. Her primary goal is to maintain peace and stability in her beloved city, making her an ideal candidate for the mission at hand. Her connection with the city and her knowledge of its magical defenses will be invaluable in solving the case of the stolen artifacts. As part of the spell guard, she would have been personally affected by the thefts, giving her a personal stake in this mission. Liara's loyalty to Silverymoon and her position in the Spellguard would provide a strong motivation to join the adventure if she is played as a PC. If used as an NPC, she could provide valuable assistance and information to the party, being their point of contact within the city's authorities. So this is a really cool thing that this is generated here. I'm really, really happy with that. Liara's presence in the adventure can help showcase the city's response to the thefts and underline the importance of the task given to the adventurers. She can also provide an insider's view of the city's politics and its workings, further enriching the setting and the plot. So what a really cool way to enhance the adventure and kind of give it some substance. I also asked it to create a list of information that she can provide once she trusts the PCs. And this is the important part. I told it to format the list, and it's not a table, but a results list based on a 1d8 die roll. 2 pieces of information max per encounter. So I gave an example. This is what I want. I want the title to be what Liara Shadowmantle knows, a 1d8 result as the header, and then these are just examples of what the output I want. So now it said, okay, here's a list. So it gives me the results and all 8 of the potential outcomes. And the reason I told it to do this is because I want to make a table in Fantasy Grounds, and they're separated by this pipe. So instead of a comma or semicolon or colon, I want it to be separated by a pipe, which will make it less confusing for Fantasy Grounds when you want to parse this in. So what I'll do is I'll copy and paste this information, this table, and hit copy, and then I'll go into Fantasy Grounds and go to tables and create my own table. So if I go into the tables section under the campaign, I'm going to create a new table, but I want to make a group. So what I'm going to call this is I'm going to add the category by clicking this green plus button, and then I'm going to add in that data in a moment here. I want to get my pointer up so you guys can see what I'm doing. And this will help, in the future, if you guys want to use a tool like Chat GPT or some other AI program, this kind of gives you an idea of how you can incorporate it. So I'm going to take and add a new group, and it will call itself Group 1 by default. So I kind of have to navigate through all this stuff because I got a lot of other stuff loaded. So that's another thing is, do you really need all that other stuff loaded? Which I probably don't. But nonetheless, so it's going to call itself Group 1. I got to find it now. There it is. So here's Group 1. And I don't want it to be called Group 1, so I'm going to edit this to, I'll call it whatever the title is. So that was, I already forgot. Something Shadows. I can't remember. Let me go back. Let's see. I want to go back to the beginning. What did it call this? It is called Silver Echoes. Okay. So we're going to call this Silver Echoes. That's the name of the adventure. Just kind of a cool title. And then I will select that new group now because I want to be able to, kind of isolate the content that I'm going by the light of the silvery moon. Yeah, exactly. So now what I'm going to do is click the plus or add item or the import table. So I'm going to import the table. So I'm just going to hit Control V, which is the easiest way from copy and paste. I'm going to take this top line, what she knows. So let's see, since that's being parsed, it's kind of hard to select this, but if you hold down, I believe, the Shift key and use your arrows, you can highlight just the text you want. And if you'll notice, I'm removing that. And each one of these is on a separate line. And then what I'm going to do is go to delimited, because this is going to tell Fantasy Grounds I want to use this table. The delimiter is going to be a pipe, which is that pipe symbol. And then is the column header in the first row? Yes, that's this 1d8 and the result. And table ranges in the first column are over here, which is yes. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. So when you do this, it's going to formulate the table instead of copying and pasting everything by hand. So I'm going to hit import, and it looks like it did it right. So when you expand this, you'll notice that it has all the results from 1 to 8, and it named it 1d8 and then the result. And then when you roll on it, you can check to see what it does. And so it says Liara mentions that Naxine, the gnome owner of the Shining Scroll, was a former member of the Spell Guard. She believes Naxine to be trustworthy, but suggests keeping an eye on her. So this is one of the potential outcomes, that information that you'll get from Liara if she's an NPC. If she's a player, she might give you a couple more, but as an NPC, that's the information that she's willing to give out. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and close this what she knows for right now. And I'm going to actually go in and put in her stat block, because you can do that too in Fantasy Grounds. So under NPCs, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a category. And then for group 1, I'm going to edit it to Silver Echoes, because I want to encapsulate what I'm working on and also have a kind of a separation. And then I'll just put hyphen, or not even a hyphen, I'll just put NPCs. So this says Silver Echo NPCs. And now I'll get out of the edit mode, and then I'm going to select Silver Echo NPCs, and I'm going to lock the table because I don't need that loose anymore. And then I'm going to go to the import tool and import the NPC. So this is another tricky thing that you'll come across with Fantasy Grounds. You kind of have to learn how it parses and how it's going to accept the data. But essentially, I'm going to come in and go back to my Chat GPT notes here and go back down to the bottom. And what I'm going to do is copy and paste the stat blocks that I had it generate for this particular individual and for others. So I wanted to, let's see, here's Liara Shadow Mantle's NPC stat block. So it's set up a certain way. And what I did is I gave it an example. I said, please write a DnD5e NPC stat block for Liara. In the background area, add in her background and the information list from above. Base the format and style from the example below. Do not deviate, because the information that this will help will need to be parsed into the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform. So I gave it an exact example of how I want the text to be formatted. It's very critical. If you don't do this, or if you do this too long and it starts adding in stuff that it wants to, which it will do, this will become a nightmare. So if you rely on Chat GPT to create NPC stat blocks, you have to be very specific. You have to give it examples, and every now and then you have to remind it of what the example should look like, because it'll start doing it its own way. I don't know why it does that, but I noticed that after doing like 10 stat blocks, it just if you don't ask it the same way each time, like if you don't request the NPC stat block exactly the same way every time, it's going to change the way it outputs this information, and that's not what you want. So here it says, okay, here's what the stat block would look like. And then it even goes into the notes and background. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste this whole thing, except for the absolutely. And then I'm going to hit Control-C for copy. And now I'm going to go back to Fantasy Grounds and hit Control-V as in Victor. One of the things is you don't need the notes in the background in the left-hand column. So I'm going to take this section here and copy and paste it over to the notes section over here on the right. And then I'm going to delete this stuff here because it's not needed for the parsing of the stat block itself. And then here's the stat block. And if you kind of want to know what Fantasy Grounds is going to do when it imports, if you right click and you go to clean up text, it's going to remove any double spaces and that sort of thing. Same thing over here. So if I right click and go clean up text, it's going to get rid of all the extra spaces. And now I'm going to put her name up here in bold. So this is Liara Shadowmantle. I'm kind of doing a little bit of the formatting ahead of time. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Control 2, which is going to change this to a header. And then I'm going to potentially link the rumor table or the information table. So what I'm going to put is Liara's, we'll say, actually, I'm just going to, whoops, I'm going to change this to, I'll say theft. I don't know, maybe I'll just call it information table, because that's what this is. This is what she knows and what Liara Shadowmantle knows. Okay, so I'm just going to put information table and then highlight that in bold. And then down below, I'm going to hit enter, and then I'll link this table that I made for her into this section. So what this does is it makes it more handy if you're going to use her as an NPC. Not only would you have the story entry linked in the story somewhere or in your adventure, you can also have it on the other tab on the NPC itself, since this mostly surrounds her. And then for this background thing, I'll go ahead and put a bold, and for notes, I'll put a bold there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hit import. What I'm hoping is that it looks so far, it looks pretty good. Like all the way the text is formatted, it really does matter. So every little single thing here could possibly break this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit import and see what we get. Yeah, so that looks like it worked out well. So I'll leave this NPC import up in case. But when you open this up, you're going to find that it parsed it correctly if you put in that information correctly. And then I'm going to lock it temporarily just to see what it looks like. So it looks pretty good. It looks like it parsed it correctly. And then on the other tab, this is where the table is that I linked. And then here's the summary that the import uses, which looks really nice. And then this is the information that I added by hand. So this is a really nice import tool if the formatting that you're inputting is correct. Now, I've done a whole series of videos and articles about that because this is annoying. When you don't have the correct format, it really can piss you off. It'll make you pull your hair out. So you really have to learn what to look for and how to format the text. Otherwise, this tool doesn't really help you much. So it just depends on what your needs are. So that's one of the NPCs that I'll need for this adventure. And then I had Chat GPT create the other. So I kind of do the NPCs at the end of my work, because if I do it in between, it throws off the conversation a lot and it starts getting messed up. I found that doing the conversation at the end, doing the NPCs at the end really helps. So that's her. That's Liara. This is Clarshi Tarov, was someone that you meet at the Moon Wyvern Inn. So again, I'm going to take this information, copy and paste it into Fantasy Grounds. And when you do this enough times and you get used to it, you're not going to have as many hiccups or problems with the import tool. It's not always going to be perfect, but you can get really close. So again, I'm going to bring up the import text, and then I'm going to paste it into this area up here. And then the notes part, I don't need that I don't really need this in the parsing area for the stat block. The notes are basically for myself that I'm going to use. And then the background would be another thing. I don't need that as well, because that will throw off the parsing. So the background, notes, or anything that you want to link back here should go on the other side. The only stuff that should be on the left here are the stat block itself. Any notes or anything additional equipment, all that stuff goes over here on the right. So once I have this in, I'm going to right click and go to clean up text, It will remove any spaces that are unneeded. I'll do the same thing here on the right. You don't have to do that because Fantasy Grounds actually will automatically do that before it imports. But sometimes I like to see kind of what it's doing because once in a while I'll catch a mistake by doing that. So go ahead and do that and go to import, and there we go. So here's the N proprietus for the Moonwyvern Inn, which is on the way to Everland. And it gives you some of her stats and such, and her traits, and then her weapon, and then on the back it gives you this nice little summary. And if you miss some of the formatting, you could definitely come back here and put bold on here. But to make this part of it from here below where it says Clarcy Taraf, the proprietus, this actually is something that the import tool does. I don't know how to create this manually without doing some sort of manipulation in XML data, but this is what it looks like when it imports. So when you have older content in Fantasy Grounds, you'll notice that this summary thing won't be there. It'll just be the background notes and maybe a link to a picture. So that's how you can tell when content was created before and after some of the new changes in Fantasy Grounds. If you want this summary, you want it to look nice, you can make a copy of a NPC or get the data and reparse it yourself, and you'll get this summary. But nonetheless, this is just a quick and dirty way to get all the NPCs in here a little quicker than hand typing them all out. So if you use Chat GPT and you give it a really good, straightforward template, it will definitely make things easier for you. I'm going to copy and paste the template that I'm using after the video so that you guys can copy and paste that and kind of make your own. And all it is a generic stat block that has the formatting that you want. And it's very precise. It has to have the periods in the right place, the spacing, the wording, all that stuff makes a difference. The order. A lot of times when you copy and paste from sources that are third party, the wording's a little different, or they use colons instead of periods and that sort of thing. That's what throws us off. And I've also made an article on what the formatting should look like. A lot of times it's the ability scores and the actions, they don't have the right formatting. And I see a couple other common mistakes that come up there. Or it's really not even a mistake. Like people that create third-party content kind of have their own way of doing stuff and the way to format it. And this is in consideration for a PDF, not necessarily for that of a VTT. So you're kind of combing through some of that stuff if you're importing. So there's those two. And I'll go back to Chat GPT and just kind of come down here and pulling out. So here's for two thieves, Nell and Grax. These are the guys that try to they try to throw you off. So these are like enforcers. So I would say like they're not bosses, but they're definitely not just a regular NPC. So I'm just going to copy and paste these guys into the same format or from the Chat GPT. I'll take the background out, put that up here, put this in bold, delete this part of it, so I don't want that to parse in. So it'll throw off even if you have one little period down here that's out of place, that can throw it off. So right click, clean up that, right click, clean that up, and then go ahead and import. Take a look at it. Yep, looks good. It's got everything in the right place. Yeah, this is really slick. This makes things a ton way easier than trying to reinvent the wheel. So that's really nice. That how it formats those NPCs. NPCs are probably the hardest thing to parse or to put into Fantasy Grounds as far as the 5e rule set. I know it's kind of difficult for some of the other rule sets too. So I'm not sure if they have an import tool like this. Some do, some don't. Some use like a third party content to importer in case you want to put in content. But that's all I'm doing right now is I'm taking the information from the stat blocks and copying and pasting those into the NPC import tool. And like I said, the biggest thing about this is the format. It has to be correct. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's going to be all messed up. There'll be things in the wrong locations, all that stuff. So, okay, so that's basically most of what I wanted to share today, is that you can import tables and NPCs. You can use a program like Chat GPT to kind of help you formulate what you're going to work on. And as far as the story goes, what I might do here is go ahead and add a group here. And this is going to be the Silver Echoes again. And this will be a starting point where I will be linking most of the stuff. And maybe just make a summary and then build the reference manual after I've got everything inputted. So here's Silver Echoes. I'm going to add just kind of a place to put all of my text. And then from here, I'll start formatting and copying and pasting the data into where I actually want it to go. So I might use this as a staging area for the story and the outline, because that'll help me later when I go to do this. So I don't have to keep going back and forth between Chat GPT and Fantasy Grounds. I can actually just pull it out of Fantasy Grounds. So that's one of the things I do occasionally, is I'll go in and I'll put that in, but not until the end, because if you do it too soon and you want to add more stuff, now you're kind of making more work for yourself. So I kind of wait till the very end to do that. So here's the stat blocks for a couple of the higher level NPCs. So I'm going to put those in as well. So again, I'm using the NPC import tool. And I'm going to close that. That'll refresh it. Hit Control V as in Victor. And then take this background again and put it over here, and then erase it from the stat block area, because I don't want it to go in there. And then right click and clean up this area here. And I'm going to make this bold, and then right click, clean that up. So this cleanup just takes away extra spaces that are unnecessary. It does it automatically, but I just do it to check my work before I hit the import button. And there we go. So there's this. It looks good. Check the back. Yep, that looks really good. Even has a spell casting summary here. Wow, it's a 9th level spellcaster. I don't want to mess with that. Okay, so that's that. And then I'm going to bring in the other one. Let's see what we got here. So this is the curator of the vault. So let's do this. And this one got broken up, so I'm going to have to copy and paste it in stages. So once in a while, you'll get an entry and it'll be broken up, because Chat GPT has a limit as to what it can do. If it stops putting out the text, you just type continue, hit enter, and it will output the rest of whatever it's trying to do. So if you haven't used Chat GPT and it stops in the middle, you have to type continue, and then it will continue on with its information. So I'm going to go back to Fantasy Grounds. I'm going to paste this first part in, and then go back and grab the second part, which is down here. It was continued. So this is the background and the rest of the spells that it was trying to print. And it stopped, because it does, like, if it generates beyond a certain amount, it really stops working essentially. So I want to see if this was right. So spells, yes. So everything looks right there. Then I'm going to take the background again and paste it, and then take this stuff and delete this, because that is not necessary. Wait, yep, that's right. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit clean up and then import. But I want to make this bold first. Control B on the highlighted text. And there we go. So there's the spells. Yep. And at the back. Yep, looks right. So this is just kind of once you get the formatting, I mean, this can go pretty quick. It's not perfect, but it's pretty quick. If you've ever worked with Fantasy Grounds, making your own content from scratch, definitely want to learn how to use that tool. And this is background information for one of the agents that might be helping the bad guys. This individual is going to shadow the party and jump in when they need to. So they're going to wait for an opportune moment and then jump in and cause some havoc. So I'm just, right now, I'm just copying and pasting in the information. There's the actions. Let's see, background. Let's see if this is what I want to do. I don't know. Oh, this is a, okay, here's background continued. So this is something I added in after the fact. So what I'll do with that is I'll put it over here on the right because I know I don't need it over there. This is a tactic, so this might be important for how this individual operates. So I'll hit Control V, get this out of here, clean up the text, right click, and that's all nice and clean, doesn't look broken. And right click over here, gets rid of the extra space. And what I'm going to do is kind of make this bold so we can see what's going on here. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit import. Yep, it looks good. I really like this tool. Once you get a feel for it and you understand what the formatting is supposed to be, it's nice. So here's the tactics. So Silas is one of the agents that's going to be helping the bad guys in the adventure. So he's a skilled agent of the Veiled Alliance, adept at espionage and counterintelligence. With his blend of stealth, cunning, and combat readiness, he carries out his mission with the utmost professionalism. Despite his reserved nature, Silas is deeply committed to the cause of the Veiled Alliance, which he demonstrates through his dedication and resolve. He may not be the most imposing figure in a fight, but his strategic insights and proficiency in subterfuge make him a valuable asset to the team. So he prefers to stay in the shadows, assessing the situation and his potential adversaries before choosing the perfect moment to strike. He is a skilled marksman, and he's able to strike his targets accurately from a distance. If confronted directly, he uses his agility and cunning to evade his enemies, relying on hit-and-run tactics to keep them off balance. Should he suffer severe injuries, Silas will not hesitate to retreat, using his knowledge of stealth and the local terrain to evade pursuit. His first priority is always to complete his mission, but he values his life and knows when to withdraw to fight another day. That's really good. I really like the information that this Chat GPT has generated. I didn't tell it to do that. It actually came up with all this stuff. So it's really cool. I did ask for like a bodyguard or like an agent for the Veiled Alliance, just to have kind of like some muscle in there. It did a really good job. The guy's only got 27 hit points, 14 armor. He's not overly powerful, but he will be a valuable tool for the GM should they need someone to go in and kind of disrupt the party a little bit. I think that's what he's good for. I wouldn't necessarily throw him in there by any means for you have to do that. I just kind of threw that in there so the GM has tools in case the party is getting through too easily or they're combat situation where you want to take someone out. And now I got a Silverwatch Town Guard, which is one of their guards that they use in Silverymoon. So this is part of their town militia. So I'm going to put these guys in here just in case there's some kind of square off on the streets. And this would be helpful to have the stat block handy so you're not having to pull on a generic guard all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. So again, down at the bottom, there's the import tool. And I just copied it from Chat GPT. Going to hit Control V. And then for the background, I'm going to take that out as usual, put it over here on the right, and then Control B to make it bold. And then I'm going to delete it from the parsing area because I don't want that in there. It'll throw it off. Right click, clean up the text, right click, clean up the text. And then take a look at it before I hit go. Hit the import button, and there we go. So if this looks good, I'll lock it, kind of take a look at it. Looks good. He's armed with a spear, heavy crossbow. They have a brave trait so that they are not frightened. So that's kind of a cool thing that Chat GPT added. I didn't ask it to add brave in there. but that's kind of a cool touch. It kind of separates it from just a standard guard. And let me see what the passive perception on this guy is. It should be at least 12, you would hope. Yeah, perception plus 2, senses normal. Yeah, it's not too bad. And then you go over to other, and there's a summary. So that looks really good. So you have I have most of my NPCs done. It might have taken me maybe a half an hour. If I wasn't explaining everything, it'd probably take me like 20 minutes. And that's most of the NPCs for this adventure. I might add a couple monsters in here. And really, if they're already generic monsters, I don't need to do anything to them. However, if I want to customize them, make them more homebrew, make them more unique, I can do that. The other part of this that I'm not going to show today is to make the tokens and the images and such. Those are the next level touch that you would put on this kind of thing. So if you're going to make this more complete, you'd put in all your tokens, your artwork, and that sort of thing, and you would associate that with the images that are applicable. Right now, the NPCs just have letter tokens. But if I wanted to use like Midjourney or my own tokens that I've collected or whatever you're building, you can associate those, unlock these and go into add them to your assets folder and then drag them over to replace the letter tokens. So you could do that too. But nonetheless, hopefully that's helpful to you. That's one way you can use Chat GPT. It is free, but the free version takes a lot more time and it can be a little clunky. But the paid version is pretty good because you got access to 3.5 and 4, and it's a little bit faster in response, and you get a little bit more support if you're having issues. Same thing with Chat GPT. Anytime you have the paid version, it's going to be a little better. But as far as creating commercial content, you want to make sure that you check with the DMs Guild or wherever you're putting this stuff, because there are people who will refuse to buy it or they'll reject your submission. So you got to be careful with that. But if you're just using this around your table and use it as a tool and not a replacement to do a bunch of work, I mean, whatever, it's sky's the limit there. So that's what I'm using it for mainly, is to help me generate content and stuff that I can use. And I also use it as for teaching tools, social media, those sort of things. So it makes that job a lot faster. I think since I learned how to incorporate some of this, I think I cut down my time by at least 50%, if not more. So just keep that in mind. But I'll put the NPC template that I use in Chat GPT, and it was actually shown to me by another community user that we had on as a guest. Unfortunately, we had a little falling out, but he still helped me, and I still appreciate his help, and hopefully he's doing well. But nonetheless, everyone, you guys have a good weekend. Enjoy the rest of your time. Summer coming up for some of us, and also join our Fantasy Grounds Academy community if you need help with Fantasy Grounds, or if you want to share ideas, or if you want some inspiration. And then also July 28th through the 30th is our annual Founders Day weekend, which will be a weekend of events. We're going to have games, we're going to have a couple guests, and we're going to celebrate our community together. If you're someone who wants to present a product that's related to Fantasy Grounds, like maybe an extension, or maybe you have some cool tokens that you've made, or if you just want to participate and kind of poke around, you can do that. Or you can even help us guide people and direct traffic, and maybe even advertise word of mouth for us that we're having this event. We need people that want to run one-shots or people that want to present products or whatever. We do have a confirmation. I think Gwydion is actually going to be with me on the All Things Fantasy Grounds show on the 30th, where we're going to talk about Shadow of the Demon Lord and kind of wrap up the weekend. And then we also are going to have the guy from Arkenforge going to show us the new updated features for the Fantasy Grounds integration with the Arkenforge map platform. And I've invited a couple of the developers and like Doug and all those guys from Smiteworks. So we'll see what we get. We're still kind of in the planning stages, but so far we got the Arkenforge, and then we also have some community developers that are going to join us and that sort of thing. So should be a pretty fun weekend. Hopefully you guys can make it. Again, that's the 28th through the 30th, the end of July. It's our annual Founders Day weekend. We have it up on our website in a blog article. We have it inside of our Discord community. We have the information on the Fantasy Grounds forums under the conventions area, and we're doing social media posts like every week or two. So